Hi there. Hi everyone. Welcome to the first São Paulo chapter meetup here on this channel. My name is Teresa Lux and I'm product designer at Mercado Livre, professor of MBA UX strategy at FIAP, and global director for Ladies That UX. Here's Amiris.
Oh my God. Hello. Hi, everyone. My name is Amiris. I understand that some of you know me. I am a consultant, a professor. I have many courses, and I have my own school called UX Change. I would like to introduce to you our guest, which is an awesome person, an amazing professional, and she offers a methodology that allows a richer understanding of people's purposes and internal thinking. Let's welcome Indi Young.
Yay!
Welcome, Indy.
Hi, everybody. How are you?
We're fine. Thank you. And you?
Good. I hope you are able to stay relatively cool if you are anywhere near Sao Paulo. And we'll blow some cool air down that way for you from San Francisco.
Indy, thank you so much for accepting our invitation. Before we start talking about the main topic of our conversation, I'm sure many people would like to know your story. Can you tell me your journey and how you are becoming such an inspiring professional?
Well, it's not nobody's journey is really linear, so mine isn't either. I started out as a software engineer a very long time ago, and we were still writing software for other engineers and scientists and just encoding processes. So we would go and understand what the process is and encode that. And then we would try to understand what the edge cases were for the process and try to encode those. And then software started blooming. We started making software for other people doing other things besides just science and engineering and mathematical stuff. And the first time I was doing that, for people, it was for the Visa credit card company, and they had a call center with a bunch of reps in it who were helping people who called in because they had lost their credit card somewhere, especially when they were on travel, especially international travel. And they would try to figure out how to get a new credit card to that person. And it was done very collaboratively because they, talk with each other. Oh yeah, you were in that tiny city in the middle of Czechoslovakia. Where did you send the credit card, the replacement card? But did you send it to that bank or to this location? And, they would talk about that. And so I went there and gathered up all that information. It wasn't a process. I was gathering up how people were working together. And I didn't have any tools to do that, except a state machine and some databases. So that's the tools that I used. And I pulled together the very first understanding of how people are approaching their purpose, especially when they're working together. And it's pretty much just been my focus since then. It has evolved quite a bit. and hopefully maybe I can shed some light on how it's evolved since then.
Well, I recently had the opportunity to be in your courses and read your books. You know that I'm a big fan for the last 10 years. Let me show you something.
She's going to show me a book with all these notes.
The book that you gave me your forward here a while ago, which is amazing. Mm-hmm. And the thing is, one of the things that really is something that made my eyes open was that you were tackling and organizing something that people usually do by intuition, which mm-hmm. is doing research or making questions, sequence of questions, and ending up sort of reassuring an idea that they already had, instead of understanding what the person in front of them really want. And I would like you to explain to us your methodology and how it is important for product development.
Sure. I think a lot of us who come to the product world and the design world and the research world, all of us who come here, we have this sort of intuitive, maybe even subconscious sense of being curious about people. We have this intuitive sense of, hey, I want to understand you, but we don't have formal knowledge about it, how to go about doing that, and how to go about sort of presenting that information in a way that is helpful for our organizations. So what I've done is try to give everybody that sort of formalization. I'm still developing it along with everybody who's ever crossed paths with me, because everybody asks great questions, and it helps me understand better ways to explain this, but also better ways to use this. So at the core is, so if my goal is to create things that support people based on the purpose they want to get done, that word purpose is one of the key changes. We're not talking about a process. We're talking about a purpose. Yes, we can still do this for processes, even if you're just trying to understand how a set of engineers are doing something. This approach can still be used, but one of the key differences is for companies that I bring is that let's look at the person's purpose. And by looking at that, we can see not only how we support them, but how they use other tools as well to get what they want to get done, or to make progress on it, or like to procrastinate and put it off a little bit longer. So the idea is to really look at a purpose. And the idea of looking at that purpose is to understand another person's perspective, not to sort of fit another person's way of doing it into the way our tool works, or into the way our organization sees things, or even into the way our culture has set things up. We are each in our own culture. We are each subject to, from, little tiny kids to sort of like, well, this is just the way it is. This is the way things are done. We are, I think a lot of us listening in the Americas. And so we have this sense of, we've inherited this colonialism. We were subjects of other countries long ago in our histories, right? We are also still working in very hierarchical systems, especially patriarchal systems. And some of the time we don't think to push back, or we think of it as fighting as opposed to as expanding. And so all of this kind of, I don't know, it's like self-awareness and awareness of the systems that we're working in. That's helpful to know. So this is a second interesting point. The third thing, I bring it all together by listening deeply. So if I want to understand somebody whose way of approaching a purpose is outside of my own way of doing it, maybe they have a different cultural background, maybe they have a different socioeconomic background, maybe they have different pressures on them hierarchically, and my assumptions are not going to be valid for them. So I have to hear them. I have to truly let go of what I think and the way I'm thinking it, so that I can actually understand what's going through their mind. And I use cognitive empathy to build a structure out of that. Cognitive empathy is, so that word empathy, and I think in many languages, it's a shortcut word for all these different kinds of formal empathies in psychology and therapy, and they all have longer names. So cognitive empathy is one of those longer names that we use the short word empathy to mean. And the definition of it is to understand somebody's inner thinking, to understand their whole inner landscape, almost as if you were going to be an actor in a movie and the director just gave you a character sketch and a scene and said, okay, go act, go be that person in that scene. And I know there are movies out there that do this. So this, if that's what I want to do, if I want to be able to have that character sketch, I have to let go of who I am, and I have to listen deeply. I have to listen for their inner thinking. I have to listen for what their emotional reactions are, what other emotions that sets off, what other thinking that sets off. And I also have to listen for something that's basically their guiding principles, their philosophy to making decisions in certain different contexts. I grew up in a family where my dad kept telling me, if you fall off the horse, get back on again right away. And that was a philosophy, not like I did ride horses and I did fall off of them, but not as frequently as I failed at something that I was trying to do with school. And he would say, just try it again before it builds up into this big, scary thing for you. So listening deeply is the third key. The first one being, let's look at purpose. The second one being, let's be more aware of this water that we're swimming in. And the third being, let's try to develop cognitive empathy to truly understand other people. There's more to it, but this is, I think, what Amiris wants to talk about this time.
What is interesting is that somehow it goes in the same direction that ethnography, but it doesn't. How really? In my understanding, when you are doing ethnography, you are looking at signs and symbols and stuff around the person and everything that the person, the way the person behaves, and you sort of make a lot of assumptions. And what I understand that this methodology that you're bringing makes sure that we are not assuming anything, that we are actually seeing or listening something that is really valuable. I'll let you explain it better.
Yeah, I have joined Viviane Castillo's humanity-centered group, and there's, I'm forgetting the name, but she's a researcher who lived in a little village in Africa to which ethnographers would come and study them. And as kids, they used to love to play tricks and do silly things that the ethnographers would be like, oh, they must be, blah, blah, blahing or something. Right? So yeah, the best way I can describe it is that if you ever read science fiction, sometimes you may hear this idea of telepathy, being able to speak mind to mind, right? And if we had telepathy, if we had like some sort of computer that would allow us like to have telepathy with each other or something, that would be perfect. Then we could hear what's going through this other person's mind as they're trying to accomplish or make progress on this purpose. But we don't. So the next best thing is to ask them to tell us what went through your mind as, the last time that you were trying to do this particular purpose. And this is actually in the spirit of something that I've recently run across called orality. And orality was the tradition that all of us, humanity, sort of stepped out of our cradle with. We would talk to one another and we would pass along information and ideas and ways of doing things and like watch out for that long, skinny, snaky sort of thing, right? So orality sounds almost like it has to be spoken, right? It has to do with the mouth. And when you make movements with your mouth and with breath, you have sounds come out and then other people's ears can hear them. But that's not very inclusive. Orality, in a better definition, is two people communicating. There's a back and forth, and there's the opportunity for one of those people or both of them to query deeper. So orality can be spoken, but it can also be written. It can also be drawn. It can also be signed with sign language. So it's any two people who are having some sort of communication going on between them. And what's interesting is that people are saying that our social media is bringing orality back into our world. We're starting to hear from one person. Also with our podcasts, we're hearing from one person. We're having interactions. We have a chance, well, not necessarily with a podcast as much, but we can leave comments. And we are having some sort of a conversation in a way. What's interesting with respect to orality is that when we invented writing, it was the elite apprentices maybe, or, some worker caste that would do the writing for everybody. And then we got the printing press, and then everybody could write and everybody started reading. And this was around the same time that the scientific method was being developed. And the scientific method is a way of understanding the physical reality around us, hard science. And so there's a way of discerning the truth. And somehow I think the truth got tangled up in written. And so if it's written, it's the truth. And if it's spoken, it's hearsay, it's gossip. And they just said that. Is that really true? Right. So now in the water that we swim in now, we've got this weird, especially in business, idea that it's not valid if it's just people talking. And so part of what I do is I show how to find valid patterns across a bunch of different people talking about a particular purpose. And when I've framed it by a purpose well enough that we get patterns in thinking, and those patterns repeat, and they can come up again in later stories, and then they're validated. Later studies, then they're validated. And this is as much of the truth about people's inner thinking as we can see. And this is incredibly powerful for our organizations to be able to start basing strategy. Like, what are we going to do next? How are we going to prioritize? Do we want to support this thinking style or that thinking style now that we know that there's two or more? Maybe for our business, let's just focus on one for right now and leave that one for a little bit later. Or maybe for our business, we really have to pay attention to all 5 of them, and we're only paying attention to 2. So we can become more intentional and more clear-eyed about what our options are and which ones we can discuss that then and figure out more clearly which ones make sense for our organization.
One of the things that you're saying is that we are always in a battle between the positivists, the people that believe in quantitative research, because it's easy. I have a number here, and that's it. Although we know that we can lie with numbers, we can. But they feel like it's not easy to make a decision. I feel it constantly when I'm in a battle to sell, because that's it. A qualitative research.
Mm-hmm.
How do you overcome with this sort of questioning? Because sometimes they question the number of interviews, the qualitative data, and how reliable it is to make a decision over something like a thinking style or a mental model.
Yeah, the best way right now is to show examples of the data itself, because it does kind of speak for itself. When you have solid data and there's a lot of people talking about this one thing, and that thing is not like an opinion or a preference about your product, if that one thing is their inner thinking as they go through the process of trying to accomplish their purpose, and you're not supporting it, why? This is the question. Why? Well, we are not supporting it because we never want to support this, or we're not supporting it because we knew about it, but we didn't think it was important to people. So do we need to go find out the importance then? There is a really solid pattern here of people talking about this. There is a really solid pattern of people's philosophic approach to this, and you're not supporting it. Or the support you have is just kind of wishy-washy. It's not really meant for this particular person and this particular philosophic approach. So that's the question. It's like, if you can show that example, and I've got a bunch of examples on my website, which hopefully help. And there are examples Amiris knows of as well. There are also examples in Spanish as well. So we can get them out there. But the other half of it is like, how are you measuring things? How do you know whether you're helping this person get their process done? You're only asking how much they like it. Sometimes people use those surveys with those Likert scales, like 1 to 10 or 1 to 5 or whatever. And it's only, to me, only valid in the 1 and the 5, because those are associated with like yes and no. Yes, it worked for me. No, it didn't. Any answer in the middle? What does that mean? Each person assigns a different internal marker for each of those dots in the middle.
One of the things that I really like about the methodology is because it makes clear that we are talking about emotions, inner thinking, and guiding principles. And once you learn what they are, which concept it is, and how to use it, it makes it really easy to
Yes.
understand the way people think and make the reconstruct reality in their brains, which is pretty much what happens, right?
Yeah. It also makes people have an easier time telling you what's going through their mind.
Mm-hmm. And this is, for me, this is like mining gold and emeralds, which is it's so valuable. Do you believe that if we put our ego out of the thing, because or product managers stop thinking in their ego, and this methodology will help? Because what I see is that people are so crazy with the outcome that they forget about the experience.
Yeah. Yeah. So one of the best ways that I've seen it connect, especially for product managers, and it's not even actually the best way that I've seen is not as good as it can get. The best way that I've seen. So what I do with all of this data is I analyze it and synthesize it in a certain way so that I'm not letting my own bias curate it. I build it into a long city skyline of a bunch of towers, and each tower has windows in it. And the windows are what people said. It's either inner thinking, it's either an emotional reaction, or it's a guiding principle. And those towers are different heights, and they have different numbers of voices in them. Some of the towers only have one voice in them. So we're ignoring those towers for now because there's no pattern there. But those towers build into city blocks by having affinity of focus of mental attention amongst each other. And those city blocks end up having affinity with each other and building neighborhoods in the city skyline, basically. So this is a way of capturing the information, this sort of city idea, and it growing, and you can add more data and it grows more. The towers grow bigger, maybe a new tower, maybe a new neighborhood splits off. There we go, picture. Beneath it, beneath those towers, you take your own organization's products and features and things that you're doing and slot them underneath, align them underneath those towers. And in that way, you can say, oh yeah, we are focused on this neighborhood, but we don't support all the towers here. Is that on purpose, or is that by mistake? Is there a risk, or is there not a risk? Also, within this tower that we support so well, we only support one of the thinking styles, not the other two. Is that on purpose? Is that a risk? Now we can see it. And so the thing that I've seen somebody do is that they then take the towers as a frame for usability and other measuring types of things that we do about what we've created. And in that frame, so that tower represents some subpart of the purpose. So let's say maybe you're a person who makes loans to somebody else, and one part of that purpose of making loans to someone else is to let's say evaluate risk, not of an individual, but in groups. Like you might have portfolios, right? And so how do I make sure this portfolio's risk is balanced? So maybe that's a whole, I'd say, neighborhood in this city, right? There's a bunch of blocks, there's a bunch of towers in it. Maybe one of those towers is doing some calculations that have to do with the zip codes of the people in that portfolio. Okay. And the thinking that goes through and the way that you figure out where that person lives is going to influence whether they repay their loan. Right. So we then take, let's say that the tools we're building for this loan person, just give them tables with zip code likelihoods of repayment or something from past history. Let's say our app does that. And the person could go along and can use it. It's usable, right? But part of the thing in that tower is, am I accidentally choosing the wrong outcome based on a zip code? And by zip code, I'm saying an Americanism. That's a postal code for an area in a city. Am I making a mistake? And that mistake could be like, oh, maybe people in here have changed and they have more economic means and they pay back their loans. Or maybe I'm thinking more ethically, hey, you know what? We're actually depressing this area because maybe it's mostly people of a certain color of skin. And I'm doing this thinking as a human, as a person who makes loans, right? And I'm doing this as a part of my calculations for balancing a loan portfolio. And when you come and do usability testing with me, framed by that thinking, you will see where your tables fall short. And you will be able, this is what the other person did. They actually mapped the results back onto the tower. They were putting happy faces and sad faces. And they would put sad faces for when it was just not connecting. It wasn't supporting that part of the tower. And the product owners are like, I can finally see. I want more of this. Can we hook up all of these towers? I want to see. And I also want to make those unhappy faces happy. That's what drives us, right?
Okay. This is awesome. We have some questions here, and people are excited with all the news that you're bringing here, all the information you're bringing. So
I will show the first one. From Isabel Novaes Machado. She's chapter leader of Ladies That UX Lisboa, and she's asking, what's the best way to consolidate and share all the research and insights you get from listening to people to find internal assumptions?
Yeah, so I just described that whole cityscape kind of thing. That's the way that I do it, mainly because it's got this visual component. It ends up being like a really, really long city, huge city skyline, which is not usable as a thing. It's not a journey map at all. It's focused. There's some examples. Amiris is holding up. Yes. And I've had them wrap around a room. You don't use them that way, but you use them when you take bits and pieces of them, like I was explaining with reference to that usability testing being framed by the towers around, balancing that portfolio. So that I don't think is the only way to do it. When we go through the data, we let the patterns build up from the bottom. So we're not forcing our own or curating our own categories on something. And we could visualize that in a number of different ways, I think. I use the city skyline because I wanted to be able to map things, align them underneath the towers, and be able to show people that you've got gaps or you've got weaknesses here. And they're visible, but you can layer all that other data on there, like the happy, sad faces. You can use those towers to sort of frame what other studies you're going to be doing, especially the usability type studies, the how well are we doing in supporting this person kind of question. So hopefully that answers the question. The only other thing to say is that this data is so long-lived. We're talking about what goes through people's minds as they accomplish a purpose, not as they use a tool. And that's a different thing. Yeah. And so I have clients that I've worked with 15 years ago who are still layering data on that city skyline. They do it once a year, once every other year, once every 5 years. They whip out that city skyline. Okay, which part are we going to work with right now? Our org is super concerned with X because of the pandemic. And so let's look in there and see if there's some information we can use to frame some other studies and then map that data back on there.
I really believe, in my at least in my experience, when you share a mental model or the result of this whole effort, and you put everybody to discuss the subject there, it's like it's better than a committee where it's the moment where you made a lot of trade-offs and you were discussing the subject and making pacts between UX and IT and marketing and etc. Because everybody's in front of this and they are discussing and they are really understanding. At least it's my experience.
Yeah. One of the other things that I do, especially with respect to marketing, I've had marketing people go like, oh, I don't know, we've done all this research and we've got these, markets and demographics around like the people that we serve. And this is how we've sort of decided what to do in the future. And I'm like, that's fine. That's still valid data. We're not negating that. What I do is I like to do like a cross section, and on one axis, I'll say, here are your market segments. And across the bottom, I'll do like, here are the thinking styles that came out of this data. And let's like put a big check mark where they intersect and they're super important to us. And maybe a blank space where they intersect and they're not that important to us right now. This is always a time-based thing and contextual to what's going on around our organization. Our organization, I mean, the organization's goal, besides making the leadership rich, is to be sustained, right? So to be around in another 20 years so that we can continue to support people.
I see.
Sure. Indi, there's another question for you from Pedro Hermógenes. He's asking, how we can be a better designer for the company, for users too? I mean, how we can equalize this?
I wish I could ask Pedro to explain where he's going with this question. I'm not sure. Maybe by equalize, he means how can we get other people to understand it in the organization?
I think that what he's saying is that he's a designer, and he is very young. Okay. He's a student of mine. I know him. So, Pedro, se eu estiver falando errado, você me corrige. So in many languages. Yeah. I think that he is concerned with users being the most central thing of the decision and or the whole process of decision making, and how can he be a better designer if he's not paying attention to that? Something like that.
Yeah. I think what happens, especially when you're first in this field, whether you're junior or senior, if you're first in a job or first, a couple months or years in the field, there's this sense that it's not your place to say your thoughts. That happens everywhere around the world. I also teach, and I teach a lot of people from around the world are joining, and I hear this. So it's like, I think that to be a better designer yourself is to build self-confidence. and is to recognize what has gone through your mind. So if you are being asked by your boss to do something and you notice what's going through your mind is, it would be better if we did the other thing, or I don't really know if this is right. I don't have this information, but I'll do it because she's asking. Pay attention to those thoughts. Maybe write those thoughts down. Those are important thoughts. That's you as a designer being a designer, having your own thoughts about what you're being asked to do. And I think that even just writing them down might give you confidence to, on your own, hey, I don't know this thing. Is there a way for me to find out? Can I look in our data stores and see if other people have done studies about it? Or can I ask around and see if anybody else has done studies? Or can I ask in my community and see if somebody in, another field, like I'm in banking and they're in insurance, but they've studied something similar. Can I find out? Right? So this is you setting yourself up over the years as a leader yourself. Right?
See, Pedro. Quite a tip for you for a career.
I think that the main thing is that either you're passionate about people and understanding what they really want, or you will be, working with data that it's not that.
Yeah. Well, sometimes
reliable.
When you're first in your job, your hands are a little bit tied, right? You don't have the power to say, nope, stop what you're doing. We have to go and do this study to understand this. But you do have the power to, behind the scenes, go ask everybody, hey, did anybody else study this? And then if you get enough people who are like, no, but we should, then you get a little caucus, you get a group together who are then maybe going to that leader who asked for it and say, we feel like we don't know enough of this. We need to study something. Can we have a study about this? Maybe not this round, but we need to do it within the next quarter or 6 months or something, because it will make us able to design something more specific or more helpful to people, more supportive. So I think that's, when you start, you don't have power and people don't listen to you. But yeah, it's something that you still have some agency behind the scenes with your peers in other companies. There's ways you can build connections and actually show those, like, maybe everybody else is like, nah, we haven't studied it and it doesn't seem important. And then you'll be like, oh, okay, well, I'll just write it in my own little journal here.
Now, Indi, coming back for our conversation, for our main topic, I noticed that your courses are translated in 3 languages. Is it true?
Am I in 3 languages?
The courses.
Yes.
You have
translated in 3 languages.
4 languages.
It's amazing. Yeah. 4 languages. Congratulations.
But we have English. That counts, right?
Counts, for sure.
We have Portuguese or Brazilian Portuguese. We have Chinese, and we have Spanish.
You want to conquer. Why do you think it's important to have our method translated in the local languages?
Yes. The data actually has to be collected by somebody who understands that language deeply enough to recognize turns of phrase. The part of the thing that you're doing when you're listening is, like usual, you're hearing people explain how things are done. You're hearing people tell you their opinions and their preferences. And what you really want is their inner thinking, their emotional reactions, their guiding principles. You're not getting that necessarily. That's not how we engage with each other. And so what you're looking for is little turns of phrase that help you recognize that for this person, there might be something more. So just yesterday, I was teaching a class on this, and I had 2 volunteers talking about what they did last weekend. And, the conversation just kind of wandered around. And this guy said, oh, I'm in San Diego visiting my parents. It's where I grew up. And so the other guy's like, oh, is it good surfing weather? And the guy said, I never learned to surf, even though I grew up here, and I don't know why. And and then the conversation kept going on past that. That was a little turn of phrase, especially that I don't know why, that there's some depth there. And we could ask about it. Like, well, what went through your mind as you were growing up? And, can you think of various points in time where you considered it and didn't do it? Right? Or was it that you never considered it? And that's when we can get some inner thinking. That's when we can hear him say, yeah, my, this PE group, physical education group at school, they were all going to go surfing. There was going to be a surfing class that I was going to get credit for. And I thought that was really awesome. But that was the same time that I was studying for my college entrance exams. And I decided I really shouldn't. And I'm like, well, what's shouldn't? What does shouldn't mean? Well, I was always hearing my parents that I have to really work hard on and focus on my college because the college is going to get me a good job. And there is an uncle who didn't go to college and doesn't have a good job. And he's always asking us for money and, right? And I don't want to be that uncle.
Everybody has one in his family.
Right? So that's what went through his mind. That's some inner thinking. There's also a guiding principle there that he has inherited, right, from his parents about super working hard and only thinking about the college.
Understand.
Yeah.
It's awesome. And what about the profile of people you believe should attend your courses?
For the listening deeply, anybody. Because what you learn, the parts of speech to identify all of this, it's so helpful in all types of things, especially your work relationships, but also your home relationships. So anybody can attend those. I've got 2 courses on the analysis and synthesis. Really, researchers will probably want to do that. I've had developers who love this stuff, so the developers eat it up, the whole thing. And, I come from a background of being a software developer, so I can like, oh yeah, of course. But I would say product owners would really love not only the listening deeply, but also I've got a class on framing your study. It's kind of the last class you want to take because the other classes, listening deeply, thinking styles, and how to use this city skyline as an opportunity map, those are super interesting, especially to product managers.
I think it's time to tell everybody to visit your website or where you can find people that teach in Chinese, Indi teaching in English. I am teaching in Portuguese, and Viviana is teaching in Spanish. So now you don't have any reason why not to take the courses.
Exactly. The most amazing and brilliant thing that Amiris and Viviana are doing is they're not just, they know you don't just translate. It's a whole cultural thing. There are different ways of listening. There are different phrases and ways of speaking that people have in different cultures. And so it's not just a translation of what I teach. It's the course for that culture. So I love that.
So a question for Amiris, may I? Amiris, you are the pioneer in bringing this course to Brazil, Brazilian Portuguese. May other people from around the world attend to your courses in Portuguese. What are your expectations and goals with this project?
Well, I am a person that is tied with the UX community, and I really enjoy bringing new methodologies, bringing knowledge of all kinds to people and sharing it with my students and making sure that we have good professionals that can make the difference in the market. And stop saying things like, oh, let me validate my idea. No, you are not validating your idea.
Amazing. And Indi, Ladies Direct is a community that supports women from the beginning of when they're starting to to work as a designer, or they are leading teams in whatever they are in every step of the career. Looking back, when you were young and were starting to study, what would you like to say to yourself to encourage, inspire? Because what we are saying now is inspire and encourage girls from a lot around the world. So what would you like to say?
Yeah, because when I started out, there were women in software engineering, but not a lot. And there are fewer now. I was actually at the peak of women graduating in software design. What would I tell myself? Maybe you're not wrong.
Awesome.
Right.
I'd like to say that to me too.
Yeah.
Believe in yourself.
Yeah, believe in yourself. Yeah, I think confidence. There was something that somebody told me. For some reason, I used to go to SIGGRAPH, which is the Association of Computing Machinery's conference on computer graphics, CG. And I used to go that when it was first getting started, and it was really exciting because you got to see all the movies, like that Pixar little lamp that hops out for the Pixar movies, and it, looks around. I got to see the very first version of that before it even became their logo. So it's super exciting. And I would sit in audiences when people were giving talks. I'm like, I want to give a talk. I want to give a talk. And I'm like this super shy, woman who like, what am I thinking? Why do I want to give a talk? And somebody told me he was the head of a computer science program up in Oregon. And he said, I told him, I can't give a talk now. I have to wait until I have something unique to say. I have to wait until I'm older. And he said, no, you would be surprised how much people just want to hear how other people are doing things. It doesn't have to be unique. It just has to be you. And so I'd say that to everybody here. And I would say that to myself before I even heard it from him.
Thank you so much for sharing with us. And it's really inspiring. And so unfortunately, we have to finish our talk today. Thank you so much for your participation, for sharing so much with us, and we hope to see you soon.
Yay! See you all.
And guys, to learn more about the Indi Young course in Portuguese in any other language, please visit her website. We will find it in this description. Bye.
Bye.